You've learned how to generate random numbers using Python, and we've also taken a look at using lists and tuples in Python. What I'd like to do today is to go through a simple program in Raptor that will show you how you can also generate random numbers in Raptors and how you can use Raptor arrays, which are the equivalent of the lists and tuples that we've learned about in Python. You'll see in the hierarchy chart that I've already created that this is going to be a simple program. We're just going to have a main module, and that main module is going to call a module which will get a random number. So we're going to generate a random number, and then we're also going to evaluate that random number. The evaluation is going to be determining whether that number is low, medium, or high, and we'll have some ranges that we'll set up to make that determination. So let's go ahead and we're going to start up Raptor and get started putting our program together. Okay, we'll start off by putting our comments in. So let me go ahead and add some comments. And I'm going to say that this is my random number array example. And I'm doing it in the fall of 2013 in this program. Generates a random number. Then it's going to print a message it would make more sense if I say hi, medium, D-I. Sorry for the typing today. Okay, and what are we going to use as far as variables and all in doing this? I'm going to have an integer, and that is going to be my random number. And let me just put a comment in here. So this is okay, so the random number generated by the program. And then I'm also going to have something that I'm going to call range, and you'll see that I'm using all uppercase letters for this, and that's indicating that it's a constant, that the values that I put in this are not going to change. And I'm actually going to set this up to be an array, and the array is going to be used to store the labels, an array used to store the labels for the magnitude of the number. And that's all I should need for this. So I'm going to say done, and there's my comment. So let's go ahead and get started now. We're going to use something called random number, and since I'm using random number, what I want to do is initialize that. So let me go ahead and initialize it by using an assignment symbol, and I need to go ahead and save. Let me do that. So let me call this my random number array example. And this is going to be, let's see, I think I'll call this random num instead. That'll be a little bit easier for me to type, a little bit shorter. And that means I need to go back here and make sure this is matching up. So let me just call it random num. Okay. So my random number is going to be initialized to 0. Now I'm going to set up my array. To set up my array, I'm just going to assign the values that I want to have in it, and it's going to stay the same. So this is like what a tuple would be when we were working with Python. So let me go ahead and do another assignment symbol. And we said we were going to call this range. And what I want to do is put into the first element of range. And you'll notice that I used the number 1. When we worked in Python, our list started with an index of 0. And that's a little bit difficult for us to think about because we think of counting starting with 1 and the first location being 1. Well, Raptor makes it a little bit easier for us. The first location in an array when we're working in Raptor is 1, not 0 like Python. So in range, index position 1, we're going to put the value low. and then in range, index position 2, we will put the value medium, and in range, index position 3, we will put the value high. Well, it looks like we have things set up, so we're ready to move on to our processing. Let's take a look back and see what we're going to do. So we need to set up a function called getRandomNum, and we're going to pass to it random num. Now, if we think about this, we're going to generate the random number. So we have it initialized random num. In main, we're going to pass it into getRandomNum, and then we need to get it back from getRandomNum so that we have it to use in main so that we can pass it to evaluateNum. So let's go ahead and get this started. So we're going to right-click on our main tab and add a procedure, because these are functions are what we used back in Python. They're called procedures when we're working here in Raptor. So we add a procedure, and that procedure, we're going to call that, let's see, look back here and see what we decided to call it, getRandomNum. And we said we were going to pass random num to it, and we need it as input. We also need to get it back, so we're going to use as input and output. So we click OK. So here we are. We have in, out, random num. Get random num is the name of our procedure. Let's add our comment before we go any further. So here is our comment, and for this one we're going to say that it Okay, so I'm going to generate a random number from 1 to 100, and that's just a range that I've chosen for this example. And I've also included in this comment that we're going to use the random and floor functions, which are built into Raptor. So let me go ahead and click Done. And if you want to find out about generating a random number and you don't know how to do it, obviously you're watching this video to learn, but you also can learn about it just by using Help within Raptor. So I'm going to click on Help, and we're going to look at General Help. And in here you have the contents and index or search. And I'm going to try using search and search for random number and see what I find here. Okay, well it looks like there are some functions that must be related to it, so let me double click and we'll open that up. Okay, here's talking something about random, but let me scroll on down. Here's floor, which I mentioned, and we'll need that in a moment, but let me come on down through. And you'll see here is the random function. The random function in Raptor is going to generate a random number. So the function returns a random number in the range from 0 to 1. Now notice that the number is never 1. It's always a number that's less than 1. So it'd be anything from 0 to 0.99999, as many nines as you can think of. So the way this works is we're going to use random times n, and then we're going to add 1 to that and take the floor of it. And floor, if I look up here, what floor does is it returns the highest integer value less than or equal to the argument. So for example, here if we had 15.9, it returns 15. For 3.1, it returns 3, and so on. So by doing that, if we take a look at this, what we're going to do is say that we want to generate a random number that's from 0 to just less than 1. We want to multiply that by, we're going to use 100. So by doing that, we're going to end up with numbers that are in the range from 0 through 900 or through 99. We want from 1 to 100. So if we add 1 to that, that's going to work for us, and then taking floor gets rid of any decimal portion that we might have had. So that's how we're going to come up with what we're going to use in our procedure to be able to get our random number from 1 through 100. So let me go ahead and close this, and we're going to add our assignment. And in our assignment, what we're going to do is say that random num is going to be the floor of random, we're calling the random function, multiplying by 100, and that gives us our numbers that are going to be from 0 through 99.999. We're going to add 1 to that, and then by taking the floor, we get just the integers that are going to be from 1 through 100. So let me see. So random times 100, we add 1 to that, take the floor of it, and put the results of that back in random num, and that's going to give us our random number. Okay, that's all we need to do in this procedure, so let's go back to main. Okay, let's add our call before we forget about doing that. So here's our call, we add that in, and we're going to call getRandomNum, and getRandomNum, we are going to pass to that random num. We pass it in with a 0 value, we get the random number set in it, and then we send that back to main. So we'll click done. And now what we need to do, if we look back over here, is evaluate the number. So we're going to determine now if the number is low, medium, or high. So we're going to create our procedure called evaluate num. So let's go back over to Raptor and create another procedure. And this procedure we are calling evaluate num. And if we forget how we were thinking about doing this, we're going to pass into it our random number that we generated, and we're also going to pass in range because we're going to use range to evaluate it. We're going to pull our labels out of that based on how the evaluation turns out. So we need to pass into it random num, and that's going to come in, and then we don't need to send anything back to main. Main isn't going to do anything after this. And we're going to pass in range. And you'll notice that I don't have to use the brackets or anything. If I just use range, it knows that I'm passing that array. So we will click OK. And we have this set up to get started. Now, we are going to write our comments. And in the comments, this is going to evaluate a random number. If the number is less than or equal to 30, it is a low number. Okay, so if the number is greater than 30 or less than or equal to 60, it's a medium number. And if the number is greater than 60, it is a high number. And those are just ranges that we made up for the purposes of this example. Now, when I'm doing this, what I want to be able to do is use my array that I created, range, and it has my labels in it, my low, medium, and high. And what I'd like to do is just set an index that I'm going to use, and then based on that index, I can use one output statement, and that single output statement is going to print the correct message by pulling the information out of the array. So I'm also going to use an index, and I'm going to call it something just M because it's going to be my message index. Okay, so index used to indicate the message to display. So before I go any further with this, I always want to show that I'm initializing things. So I'm going to initialize M, and I'm going to say that M is equal to 0, so that shows that M is going to be an integer. And then I can start into my logic. So I'm going to need to make some decisions here. So I'm adding a selection, and in this selection, the first thing I'm going to do is look at random num, and I want to see if random num is less than or equal to 30. Okay. Now I have two options here. If random num is less than or equal to 30. Yes. What do I want to do? What I'm going to do is add an assignment statement, and in that assignment statement I'm going to say that m is going to be equal to 1. So that's going to allow me to look at range. You remember range was set up back here in main. So range in the first position has the value low. So what I want to do is set my index to 1 so that I'm going to be able to get this message pulled out. So come back in here. So if my random num is less than or equal to 30, I set my message index to 1. That's going to get me the message which says low. Now I need to do a little bit more checking. I'm not finished yet. So I need another selection. Okay. And for this selection, I am going to look at random num again. And I want to look at random num, and now I want to find out if it's in that medium range. So in the medium range, it needs to be greater than 30, or it would be less than or equal to 60. So let's think about where we are. I already know, I've looked at this number, and I've said random number less than or equal to 30. Well, that's not true. So I already know that this number is greater than 30. So I don't need to check that part of it. All I need to do is look at random num and see now if it's less than or equal to 60, because I already know that it's going to be greater than 30. So is the random number less than or equal to 60? If that's true, then I want to set m to 2. And now you might think that I would need to put another selection in here to look for my third, whether this is greater than 60. But if I know that the number is already, it's not less than or equal to 30, it's not less than or equal to 60, well, the only thing left is that it must be greater than 60. So I can just go ahead and do another assignment over here and say that m is going to be 3. So by setting these to 2 and 3, if we go back here to main, you can see that 2 equates to medium and 3 equates to high. So now what I can do is add my output. So here's my output. I've determined which one of these values needs to go in the message. My message single output is going to be down here. And in this single output, I can say the random number is, and the user at this point would have no way to know what the random number is that was generated. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in here. And remember, plus is our concatenation symbol, so I'm going to add to that the random number. So the random number is, and add to that, I want a period because that would end my sentence. And then I'm going to say this number is, okay, and then add on to that from range using my index, which is m, and add on to that a period. So let's make sure I have all my quotes correct here, that I haven't missed anything. So we have a string that's going to say the random number is, we add on to that the value that's currently in random num, so whatever the random number is that was generated. Then we add on to that a string that has a period and then says this number is, and add on to that the value high, medium, or low low, medium, or high is probably the better way to say it, since that's our 1, 2, and 3, using the index that we've just set back here and pulling that value out of range. So if this all works, let's go ahead and click done, and let me go ahead and save it. We'll go back here to main, and let's step through it one at a time so we can see what's going on here. So we're going to start step to next shape, click that one time. Okay, our random number is going to be set to 0, so we see that happening. And then range is going to be set. And you'll see if I click this plus over here, it's going to open up and show you how it's actually set. So range has a size of 3 now, and it has 1, 2, 3 values, low, medium, and high. Ah, you know what? I'd missed something. All this is going to do at this point is get our random number. It's not actually going to calculate our random or to evaluate our random number. So we'll go ahead and do this just to see the random number being generated, but I need to go back and fix that. So it's going to go ahead and generate our random number. So here we go, getting our random number, and our random number is 35, and we come back to main and nothing else happens because I didn't make anything else happen. So you can see as you're working through things, sometimes things do go wrong and you need to always check and make sure that it is working correctly. So let me go ahead and come back here and add our call statement in. And we're going to put our call statement in and we're going to call evaluate num, and we're going to pass to that random num and also range. Okay, let me save this and we'll give it another try here. Okay, so here we go. Random num set to 0. Range has the different values set in. Let me open this up so we can see that. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get our random number again. So we're over here getting our random number. Let's see what we get this time. Okay, this time we got 81. So over here on the left, our random number is 81. We have this set as in out, so random num is getting passed back to main. So you see over here in main we have our random number, and now we're going to evaluate it. So we know that the random number is 81. We're setting our index to 0. So is random num is 81 less than or equal to 30? No, it's not. Is random number less than or equal to 60? No, it's not. So our message index gets set to 3, and our message that we're going to output is, here we go, the random number is 81, the number is high. Let's try it one more time, and this time I'm not going to step through it individually. I'm just going to go ahead and run it. So here it's executing, and we can just watch it go through. And our random number is 39 this time, so you'll see that the message index was set to 2, and it says the random number is 39, this number is medium. Okay, well, I hope this gives you a little bit of an idea how you can use arrays in Raptor and also how you can generate your random numbers. So this should be useful for you as you're working on your project. Hope your project goes well for you. Please get in touch with me if you have any questions at all.